Hi everyone. In this video I am going to explain how to use log4j mechanism in standalone Java application. Let us start with an example and I will explain about log4j. Go to File, New, Java project, choose some project name, log4j project, and then create a class. Give some package and click finish. For using log4j mechanism, you have to add log4j.jar in the class path. So right click on the project, go to build path, add log4j.jar. I have already downloaded. If you search with log4j name in Google, you can easily find this log4j. I have already downloaded and I'm just adding that into the class path. Okay. So basically log4j.jar contains set of classes. You can see there are many classes. Okay. So that is the reason we are adding log4j.jar. Now we write a simple program to use log4j mechanism. Log4j mechanism is used to debug or log the error messages in real time. So instead of using system.out statements, we use logger object for logging the messages. So first what we have to do is we have to get an object of class logger log. If you see, can you see, since we have added the jar file, it is showing the import. Don't import java.util.logging, use org.apache.log4j.logger. Okay, now we have to, can you see, this is the, so we have to create or get the object of class logger. You can see the class in this package. There is a class called logger. Okay, that is the reason we added log4j.jar. So basically we are using the classes from or provided by the log4j.jar. log4j. So get the object. How to get the object is you have to say there is a static method get logger, and you have to specify class. That means you can give hello world log4j, means you can give class.getName. Since you are logging the messages, you can give the name of this class. So hello world log4j dot class dot get name. Okay, so instead of using system.out statements, now you can use this object to log the messages. There are different methods in logger. Log that. To save the time, I will copy the statements. Can you see? There are different methods. Since this is the static method, we cannot use this directly, so I am making it static. So can you see, there are different methods in the logger object: trace, debug, info, warn, error, pattern. Okay, instead of using system.out statements, we can use the methods from the logger, okay, to log the messages. If you think that the message is error kind of thing, you can use log.error. If it is a warning message, you can use log.warn. If it is an info message, then use log.info. If this is a debug, for in the development time, you sometimes you need the information whether a method is entered or not, or if we get connection successfully or not, or if such kind of things you can use. For such kind of messages you can use debug messages. Okay, so basically there are different methods. If you want to log an error in exception block, then use error instead of debug, because that's not a debug message, that's in error messages. So in system.out statements, for everything you will use only system.out, but in log4j, for each type of message they have given one method. So for error you can use error method. For logging info messages, use info. For logging debug, use debug method. Okay, let us run this and see what is the result. Can you read the message? It is saying that no appenders could be found for logger. Please initialize log4j system properly. That means to use this we have to configure the log4j mechanism. Okay, how to configure means I have already created a file called log4j properties. Okay, so we have to configure log4j mechanism. To use these methods, we have to configure or start the log4j mechanism. Okay, before going that, I will explain one more topic. If you see these methods, there is some level kind of thing, means debug level is less than info and info level is less than warning, warning is less than error, error is less than fatal. That means most serious, warning, info and debug. Okay, remember this. That means the priority of this is highest, right? And next to this error is the priority, next warning, next info. Debug messages means for our development purpose we are using that, those are not critical, so that's why this level is in less than info, and this is less than warning, warning is less than error, and error is less than fatal. Remember this order and I will explain what is the purpose of this level or hierarchy. Okay, now we have to create a properties file to start the log4j mechanism. If you use just these methods and run, you will get a message saying that please configure log4j properly. Can you see? So basically there is something called root logger. Okay, you have to assign a level for this root logger. Okay, you have to assign, see, out of these levels you have to assign one of these levels for the root logger. There is something called root logger at the top of the hierarchy. Okay, so in this case I have given debug. This is the level, and then I have to given a name for something called appender. Appender means appender specifies. See, when you write system.out statements, those statements will go to console here, right? But using log4j mechanism, you can send these to file, or you can send these to database, or you can send these statements to console. So you can send these statements to multiple destinations. Which one you like? You have to specify that information, whether you want to redirect these statements to the console, or you want them to be in a file, or you want them to redirect it to a database. So that is the purpose of appender. So for appender, give the name. So basically we have to specify two things first. For the root logger object, specify the level, means one of these. Give some one of this. I will explain what is the uh, purpose of other levels. For now, you are specifying debug level, then give the name for the appender. Then you have to say, with this you see file appender is a class. If you see the jar files, you can see org.apache.log4j.file appender. So basically there are different types of appenders. File appender, okay, can you see there are different types of appenders. Console appender, if you use this, if you specify this class here, then what will happen? These statements will go to console. So if you use this console appender, if you specify console appender here, the statements will go to console. But in this case I specify file appender. Can you see there are different types of appenders? Async appender, console appender, okay, file appender. In file appender also there are different types, like rolling file appender. That means once the file size exceeds some specified limit, it will create new file. So rolling appender. There is something called daily appender, daily rolling file appender. That means each day it will create a new file. Okay, so there are different types of appenders. In this example I didn't mention console appender, I mentioned file appender. That means all this output will go to a file. So in this line we are specifying debug level, and I am giving a name for the appender. And for this appender can be console appender or file appender. But if you want to use file appender, specify that for the name appender I want to use file appender. So specify the class name. I want to use file appender for this appender. If you want console appender, you have to specify console appender. Okay, but for now, for this example, I want all these statements to be redirected to a file. So I specify file appender. File appender is basically a class from org.apache.log4j package. If you specify file appender, these statements will go to file. If you specify console appender, these statements will get printed here. And then you have to specify the file name. You want this output to go to a file, so you have to specify for this appender what is the file name. Okay, that is the reason I have given the name of the file into which these statements get printed. Okay, now let us run this. So first we have to create a properties file. log4j we can use XML or properties to specify this information, or even from the code also you can specify this information. In this example or video I am using properties file. Okay, so then what we have to is we have to say property configurator.configure. You have to call the configure method. Then what will happen internally, it will read this log4j properties and understands all this information, means whether we need the logging statements to be redirected to the file, or what is the level, everything, what is the file name into which it will be redirected. So basically this class has a method called configure. For that you have to give the path where the log4j file is there. So there are different versions of configure method. You can give the direct path or you can give the resource. I am using resource, means I can give the input stream. To get the input stream I am doing like this. I am using class loader to load the resource. Okay, you can give directly the path where this log4j is present, but instead of that I can give the input stream also. To get the input stream for this properties file, this is in the class path, right? So you can use the class loader method called get resource in the class loader to load this properties file as a stream. Okay, done. So that means this line reads this file and understands the file name and what is the appender, what is the level of the root logger. So basically I will repeat, there is something called root logger. You have to configure this to use the log4j mechanism. So you have to specify two things in the first line, the level and then appender. And for the appender, give the appender details in the next line. Means what is the appender you want? You want file appender, or you want console appender, or you want a rolling appender, or which appender you want, specify here. That means that basically what this statement is saying, for this JL use file appender. You can't simply say JL, you have to say log4j dot appender dot JL. That means for this JL, the appender of this JL is file appender, and the appender layout is pattern layout. There are different layouts, means HTML layout. If you specify HTML layout, you can see this is the class in the package called, if you see there are different layouts, HTML layout, pattern layout. Currently I am using pattern layout. Okay, then I have to specify the file name. That means for this appender use this file. Okay, so everything is set, and you have to load that properties file using configure method. Then your log4j mechanism kicks in. Now we will run this and refresh this. Can you see a file created? Okay, we will remove this and run again. Just refresh this. Can you see all the messages got printed? But if you observe, debug message printed, info warn error fatal, debug info warn error fatal. Can you see? Trace message didn't get printed. Trace is less than debug info, like this. So basically, now I will explain what is the purpose of specifying debug here. When you say debug, okay, when you say debug here, if you see the hierarchy, trace is less than debug. So if you specify debug in the properties file, only logger.debug statements, logger.info statements, logger.warn, logger.error, logger.fatal. Can you see? Trace is less than debug. So when you specify debug, all the levels which are greater than or equal to this level will get printed. If you say debug, since trace is less than this one, this line will be ignored. So only these methods will get executed because these levels are greater than or equal to debug. Okay, now let us see. I will change this to trace. I will remove the file again. Now observe what happens. Refresh. If you see now, when you specify trace here, see the log. Now trace message also got printed because when you say trace, all the levels greater than or equal to this level gets printed. So trace, debug, info, warn, error, fatal, all the message, all kind of messages get printed. Let us see, modify the value to info. Now you can understand what will be the output. We will delete this. So now can you guess? When I said info in the properties file, that means all the levels greater than or equal to this will get printed. So debug messages won't get printed, trace message won't get printed. Refresh and see. Can you see? Only since you specified info, all the methods with the level greater than or equal to info gets printed. So info level messages, warn, error, fatal only gets printed because these levels are. Let us see, if you specify fatal, change to fatal. Now run again and observe the output. Can you see? When you specify fatal in the log4j properties for the root logger, so for root logger, if you specify fatal, then what is happening? Only fatal messages got printed. All these messages get ignored because the level of fatal is highest. So only the level greater than or equal to fatal gets printed. Since error, warn, info, debug, trace level are less than fatal, all these are ignored. So basically, the purpose of using log4j in real-time application is you can use the debug while developing the code, and when you send the code to the production, you will specify error in for the root logger. During development time, you will say debug, so that all the debug messages, info messages, all the debug messages, trace messages, info, warning messages get printed. But once the development is and the testing is completed, if you add so many statements in your code, your application will degrade, means the performance will be slow. So these are unnecessary, these are required. The debug messages are required only during the development time. So you can enable and disable by simple configuration change. During development time you will set debug, then what happens, all these messages get printed in your development environment. In the production system or live system, in the properties file you will specify error, then only the error messages get printed. So where you will add these, in exception blocks you will add. Let me show how we use in the real time. If you see here, in these cases you can use logger.error. Okay, and for debugging, kind of things you can use logger.debug. If you want to know in the JDBC program whether you got connection or not, you can use logger.debug. Then during the development environment, set value to debug. Then you can understand whether you are able to get the connection without any issue, and you can see that you got the connection and before iterating. This is for development time. During development time we just want to see if we are able to execute the code without any issues. So for that, to find, I have added one line before iterating the employees and after that. So use this as debug statements, and the in exception block use logger.error. So during development time all the debug messages, means this line will get printed and this line will get printed. But when development is completed and testing is completed, you need to remove, because unnecessary waste of application time, right? This will take some time, right? Unnecessarily, if you add a huge number of statements, it will slow down the performance. So we need only these to find the issues. That is why enable error for the logger, then only error messages get printed and all this unnecessary stuff will not printed. But we are not removing, they will be there, but just by simply changing the configuration from debug to error in the production system, we can disable all the debug info warning messages. Okay, so that is the purpose of using log4j in real-time application. We can enable and disable. We just need to remember this. If we specify fatal, then only this line gets printed. Means this line doesn't mean only this line. All the methods, log.fatal messages in your application, there may be hundreds of fatal messages. Only those get printed. If you specify error, there may be hundreds of or even thousands of debug statements in your code, but if you specify error in the properties file, all the 1,000 statements, all the 1,000 debug statements like log.debug, those won't get printed because those will be disabled by log4j. Okay, hope you understand. Thank you.